Yeah, BTV Productions, the Cultural Preservation Station. Tune in. Tune in. Hey yo, Black education, cultural preservation, tailored BTV because elevation. Tune into the station, we rockin' the whole nation. That's right, we rockin' the whole nation, prep the new generation for mental activation. Taylor BTV's the new sensation. Stop the hesitation and learn something new. My girl Taylor B's here to show and prove. Terrorist shit.
Peace and love, family. This is your girl Taylor B, and this is Justice on Earth, episode 3. Today, we're going to be talking about Juneteenth and why Juneteenth matters. I'll give my personal opinions on why I feel like Juneteenth matters and why we should be celebrating June as a nation, as a community, and not just celebrating it, really using it to catapult our situation to a better place. So that's what today's show is about. So without further ado, we're going to get into this episode. So we'll go through our slides and here we go. This is a quest for justice on Earth. Our main objectives here are to replace racism, better known as white supremacy, with the system of justice on Earth. What we aim to do here is examine and document timelines of historical events across any and all areas of activity. We also want to add and build on to current events and pointing those out in different areas of activity of how they affect our community. We want to review current events across all areas of activity as they pertain to the Black American community. We want to reference and highlight scholarly works, our creations as a community, and our world contributions. This one's really important. Historically, we've seen that Black Americans' creations have been stolen from them, from the very land that we live on here, up to modern day time to the creation of hip hop. One of the last things that were tried to be stolen and co-opted from Black Americans as the sole creators of. So we really have to make sure that we're documenting and taking the credit and the proper steps to document that we created different things and don't let other ethnicities try to come in and co-opt things from us. When there are different ethnicities have different holidays or different things that they created or that are prevalent in their society, in their community, we don't try to step in and say, oh, we created that, or we did this, or we did that. We're just asking for the same respect back that we as Black Americans give to all of the other ethnicities and nations of the world. So we also want to expose the dominant society and replace the global system of racism with white supremacy and justice, creating a cultural repository for our creations, our contributions, and our traditions. And then we're going to do all that. We're going to do that by utilizing the 7D Cultural Ascension Practices. We can use that as a model toward our justice on Earth. So I know I haven't really rolled out those practices yet. So let's just look at those and go through them real quick. So these are our 7D, 7-dimension cultural practices that we can do as a nation to basically correct our condition in the community. We have so much that we deal with on a daily basis. We go through a lot of different traumas throughout the day, and every day we deal with these traumas. And what that does is it doesn't allow us to have time to sit down and think about things that are important, things that mean something. When you're so busy trying to survive, it's hard to add on and build and live. We want to make sure, especially from this channel, the cultural preservationists, that we're bringing forth something to add on to all of the scholarly works that our ancestors have done. We want to add on to that. So I do that by presenting this 7D model, Cultural Ascension Practices. And it has basically its state levels, and we have to see what dimensional state we're in by how we're critically thinking and how we're processing thought and putting those thought forth to make actions. So, what is 70 CAP? It's the Cultural Assistant Ascension Process. We want to ultimately create justice on earth. So, this process is 70 CAP is designed for two main purposes. That is to catalyze the cultural ascension of foundational Black Americans and to create justice on planet Earth. When you wear the 70 CAP, you'll transform from dormant to deployment. Using the 70 practices, this will help raise your state of consciousness to the Supreme State 7 while doing the work that will create justice on planet Earth. So the model is outlined to serve as a framework that builds the individual and the group into the Supreme State 7 deployment phase. So throughout out this thing, you can be in different phases of this, but using this will definitely help you build your critical thinking skills. It'll help you to reflect and make thought about the things that are actually going on that mean something. These practices can be used interchangeably as applicable and as necessary. The benefits include, but are not limited to, elevated awareness, identification of injustice wherever it stands, tools to make actionable movement toward correction. The model is for each person to adopt as they see fit individually. With enough of us doing this, it will act as the standard or the code to use critical thinking skills. It'll help us stay aware, create justice where injustice resides, elevating the state and standard in which we move as a culture, restoring us to the supreme status that our ancestors once were at. So that's what the 7D CAP is. So that's just giving you a little breakdown of it. I'm not going to go through each of the different steps right now. We'll save that for another show. But just to know that this process is out there and this is what we're bringing forth from the cultural preservationist standpoint to try to create justice on earth. Okay. So let's get into today's show. So today's show is about basically about Juneteenth. We know we just celebrated the Juneteenth holiday this past Wednesday, June 19th. So I just wanted to really get into it because I feel like there's a lot of myths that surround June and a lot of different misunderstandings of what the holiday is actually about and what it's for. So let's get into a little bit of history about it. Let's start with the Emancipation Proclamation. It was issued by President Lincoln on January 1st of 1863. And the main premise of it states that all persons held as slaves within any state or designated part of the state, the people whereof shall then be in rebellion against the United States, shall be then thenceforward and forever free. So the Emancipation Proclamation did not end slavery. So that's the first thing that we got to clear up. I think a lot of people who have that misconception of, oh, the Proclamation, President Abraham freed the slaves. No, he didn't. I mean, he did, but he didn't. And that was not what he set out to do. So it was just one of those things where they were losing a war and they needed that allyship from the Black American soldiers. They needed us to come in and help them gain the stronghold back over the South. Lincoln even stated himself that if he could conserve the Union without ending slavery, he would do so. We need to stop thinking that he freed us. We freed ourselves, and everything that we ever did in this country, we did it for ourselves. And I want us to keep that in mind because that's the same thing that we're going to have to do moving forward. We're going to have to do things for ourselves. We're going to have to free ourselves again. We're going to have to take our reparations. We're going to have to demand an anti hate crime bill for ourselves. We're going to have to demand our land back. We're going to have to demand protected class status. None of this stuff is going to be given to us. There's not going to be a negotiation where we're doing compromises with them. We're going to have to forcefully demand these things if we want them. So just keeping that in mind, that's what our ancestors had to do back in 1860s. They had to demand. They had to do that again 100 years later in the 1960s. They had to demand for their civil rights. So here we are, not quite 100 years removed from the 1960s, but far enough out where we're seeing history repeat itself. A lot of the laws and policies that were enacted during the civil rights are being reversed. The history books are being taken out of the curriculum. And not that may not necessarily be a bad thing, because those history books, I'm certain, don't have the correct history. But again, they were history books. So you want to remove history books and you want to give children books about sexuality and gender identity and different things like this. And it's not conducive to building a nation. Um, and when they do this directly affects the Black American community. Everything that they do is designed to directly affect us in a negative way. And anybody else that it affects negatively along the way, those are just casualties of war. So those people aren't really worried about by the dominant society. Yeah, so the Emancipation Proclamation did not end slavery. What it did do is it did change the basic character of the Civil War, which took place from April 12th, 1861, which ended in April 9th, 1865. Officially, it ended on August 20th, 1866, and we'll get into that later. I'm going to read something about that to show that's when it actually was declared over. And here we go with that August 20th date again. August 20th is to me, I feel like it's a special date, not just because it's my born day, but because that's the date that they claim that the first Africans arrived on this continent, which we know is a bold-faced lie. And then here we see August 20th themed again in the ending of the Civil War, which obviously also directly affects Black Americans. So we'll get into some of that significance of that date later. But so the proclamation did authorize the recruitment of Black Americans as Union soldiers. Because, as I said before, prior to that proclamation, Black Americans were not fighting with the Union soldiers. They were not allowed to fight with the Union soldiers. So again, motives for this aren't just to free the slaves. The motives were really for Lincoln to conserve the Union, and I feel like that's the only way that he thought that it could be done. And rightfully, we won't look the gift horse in the face, but at the same time, we are the ones who declared ourselves. We set forth. We fought for that freedom. And again, those people were instrumental in going throughout the South to make sure that all the enslaved people knew about this and were freed, and that's where the actual holiday of Juneteenth comes in at. That's what the Juneteenth holiday actually is. So just to note also, by the end of the Civil War, approximately 180,000 African Americans had served in the Union Army and 18,000 had served in the Navy. So again, Black Americans are the only group that has actually served in every war that is associated with this continent that they call America. That also speaks to why we deserve reparations, not just for slavery, for building a country, for fighting in every war, and being the true patriots of America. And really showing and proving that we love our country. But yep, so I'm going to go ahead and show a picture of the first proclamation when Lincoln first set this forth. Let me just pull this up so you guys can get the image of that. And then later on in the show, I have a little treat for you guys from Dr. Eugene Adams. We're going to be playing a clip from his famous Africas of Asia, where he talks about the proclamation, the Emancipation Proclamation, and he really breaks that thing down to a nutshell. And I think it's important for us to look at that. So let me just get this on the screen. So hopefully you guys can see this. Let me see if I can blow it up. There we go. So here's the Emancipation Proclamation. This is a 2-page document here that basically states everything that I just talked about. But just to give you an idea, if you guys want to come read this for yourself, I'll have the resources to this presentation at the end where you guys can come actually read this and read what he said and read what that's all about. So let's get the slides back up on the stage. So this right here is just giving us a little timeline of everything and how the timeline of the Emancipation Proclamation enforcement. And this is the Confederate States of America from 1863 to 1865. And this is just letting you know that at the end of the Civil War, the Texan enslaved Black Americans had yet to obtain their freedom. And if you look at this timeline, you'll see from 1860, immediate effect of the proclamation in the red. And then the orange is the proclamation started to be enforced in down the line in 1863. This lighter orange is proclamation enforcement by 1864. So it wasn't just Texans that weren't freed right after the emancipation was signed. Basically, those Black Union soldiers that joined the army went through with one of the generals from the army and went to go let these Black Americans know, hey, you guys are free. It's just that Galveston, Texas was the last stop. So that's why that is dubbed Juneteenth, because that happened on June 19th, 1865. So as you can see here with the yellow and the lighter yellow, this is when that took place. Okay. And then here goes a timeline that we'll go ahead and read some of. This is the emancipation timeline. So in 1777, Vermont was the first colony to emancipate Black slaves. Then we move over to 1780 to 1804, Pennsylvania, Connecticut, Rhode Island, New York, and New Jersey introduced gradual abolition from 1780 to 1804, leading to full emancipation by the end of 1865. Uh, and then in 1862, slavery was abolished in the federal territories. January 1st, 1863, the president signed the Emancipation Proclamation. And then June 19th, 1865, as you can see, those 2.5 years later, the Union Major General Gordon Granger ordered the final enforcement of the Emancipation Proclamation in Galveston, Texas. That is the timeline of the emancipation, and it's the timeline of how we get to Juneteenth. It's the journey to Juneteenth. Okay. So Juneteenth, it commemorates the day when enslaved Black people in Galveston, Texas learned that they were free, 2.5 years after the passing of the Emancipation Proclamation. So imagine 2.5 years. You're just there working. You don't know, you may have been hearing rumblings, but this goes back to how we are again today. It's like limited scope. So you may hear rumblings, but we were so indoctrinated with fear, we would never listen to rumblings. So until that Union Army came with that General Granger and read that Special Order number 3, stating that enslaved Americans were free, our people were still working. They were still working on the plantation. They were still following master's rules and doing what they were supposed to do on that plantation. By the end of the war, the Texas estimated had 250,000 enslaved people that remained out of the proclamation's reach. That's a lot of people that were still enslaved 2.5 years after they shouldn't have been. So that, to me, that's just one reason that speaks to the importance that we need repair in our community. So on June 19th, 1865, Union Major General Gordon Granger ordered the final enforcement of the Emancipation Proclamation in Galveston, Texas. Soon after, his General Order number 3 circulated in newspapers and through the word of mouth to free slaves across Texas. So it wasn't just that word of mouth and getting that word out that way. It was also those Black American Union soldiers, they were coming through physically enforcing and making sure that they were freeing our people. Like I said, we freed ourselves at the end of the day. No one freed us. We always, historically have stepped up and took part of our freedom, of our liberation as a people. It's just sad that today things are so misconstrued and the lies and the confusion has caused us to really come away from that. A lot of us are really comfortable with the way things are, maybe just because they're comfortable on their own. So they don't see a problem with the way things are. But, in my view, if one of us is experiencing injustice, like Martin said, then all of us can have the potential to experience injustice. So this is just not a black or white thing. Obviously, we know Black Americans experience the most injustice in this country, but we want to make sure everyone's experiencing justice. From this standpoint, uh, we're not here to try to incite any type of war or incite any type of race ambiguity. But we need to really start taking that time out, dedicating time to ourselves, to our own community, delineating ourselves as everyone else in the diaspora has done, whether it's been done by them specifically or whether it's just been done in society. Everyone else in our diaspora is delineated except us. Everything that we do becomes community property or community rights. And it's just not fair. It's time for us to step up and take ownership of our creations, take ownership of our rights, really reclaim our indigenous history and reclaim everything, reclaim the land, reclaim who we are, our identity, our nationality. A lot of people in the community state that's why we're not being respected. That's why we're not getting reparations, because you can't give reparations have to be paid to a nation. So a lot of people use the excuse that we call ourselves Black Americans or we're called Black Americans. Again, not what we're calling ourselves. Historically, what we've been reclassified as a people throughout the history of this nation, throughout inception, from when the first European explorers started coming here, they started reclassifying us since then, since 1500s. It's not that what we call ourselves, it's what we're made to call ourselves. It's what society has deemed us as. And that's why I think it's so important for us to do this history and do this research so we can see for ourselves who we are. And then we don't have to depend on somebody else to tell us who we are. Then as a community, we get to decide what we call ourselves and who we are. And that's why I really like some of the things that Tariq does. He has the Foundation Black American movement going, and I may not agree with everything, but I agree with most things. And I'm open to what we call ourselves. I'm open to us reclaiming our indigenous heritage as American Indians. If that's the way for us to get to our freedom and for us to reclaim our land and reclaim our rights, then I'm all for that. And I think that's what we should do. I'm not one to sit and argue about that and the names and all of that. So you may hear me use these names interchangeably. Just know that everything that I'm doing with it, it's out of love. It's not out of disrespecting ourselves or I want to be respectful to everyone. But at the end of the day, someone's going to feel disrespected. And at the end of the day, I'm tired of it being our community that's always disrespected. That's where we are with it. So I wanted to get into a couple of things. I'm going to go ahead and share a video from some people that I respect and follow. But anyway, speaking of the indigenous, let's get into this post by someone that I respect. Like I said, I'm going to be giving you guys different people who I think you should be following, who I follow, and who I respect their research. They are researchers, they're historians, and this is what we need. This is what was called for by Chancellor Williams in the destruction of Black civilization. He called for more of us to be the historian, to be the archaeologist, to be the etymologist. We have to tell the story from our perspective because the more that we allow the other perspective in, that's what's causing the divide and it's what's causing us not to take ourselves more seriously. Um, so let's go ahead and get this up. We're going to read this and hopefully the screen can be seen. I don't think I can blow this up any bigger than this, but this is a post from the Real Black Historian. Make sure you guys are following him on Instagram. It's the Real Black Historian on Instagram. So the meme says, did you know that Juneteenth is an American Indian holiday? On June 19th, 1865, General Granger announced the end of slavery at Galveston, Texas, a date referred to as Juneteenth. Galveston was not just a random or haphazard place picked to announce the emancipation of slaves in Texas. It was an Indian empire where the enslaved Karankawa Indians were reclassified as Africans and Blacks. So we're going to go ahead and read the caption that the Black historian has so gracefully left for us. Juan de Grijalva invaded Galveston in 1519. Again, 1519, guys, 100 years before August 20th, 1619. Okay, so let's keep this in perspective. So Juan de Grijalva invaded Galveston in 1519. This area was inhabited by the Black Karankawa natives. By 1835, Galveston was made the home port of the Texas Navy, and on March 2nd, 1836, Texas was declared a republic. Texas became the 28th state in the Union on December 29th, 1845. The Karankawa were a heavily tattooed, pierced, and painted nomadic people. They made a strong impression on the Europeans who wrote of encounters. The men were strikingly tall, described as between 6 and 7 feet. They were tattooed and wore shell ornaments. They had bows almost as tall as they were and shot long arrows made from slender shoots of cane. It is said that they would suddenly show up in their canoes, seemingly out of nowhere, to attack. They would run away and retreat or escape the same way. Euro textbooks say they became extinct in 1850, but this is bullshit. From TexasIndians.com. They said they are from slaves captured by the Karankawa before the Civil War. They said that the white men massacred the Karankawa men. The children and the women were captured and made slaves to the white people in the area. The Karankawa's women got married to Negro men, so their ancestors were both Black and Indian. Some of them were Mexicans, and their families still remember about the Kawakawa Indian blood, and they remember about the slaves. Indigenous Karankawa, large bands of ethnic Indian nations, inhabited Galveston to Houston, Texas, with affiliated bands into Oklahoma and Kansas. The Galveston domain was known as Opata Territory. The area included the terrain of northern Mexico's border state of Sonora, which included New Mexico, Texas, and Oklahoma, all essentially parts of New Spain. All right. So, let's keep this in mind again. We, Black Americans, have been reclassified. There's so much proof of that. There's so much going around proof of that, that I think it's undeniable. We can't keep ignoring that fact. We can't keep ignoring that proof. So the longer we do that, the longer we stop ourselves from receiving our reparations, the longer we stop ourselves from obtaining an anti-hate crime bill, the longer we stop ourselves from having a protected class status. So we really have to start doing the research. There's a reason why they don't want us to read. There's a reason why they don't, because when you go read and you start reading all of this history, then you start seeing why they didn't want you to know this stuff. Because if you read it, then you would know that you were already here prior to August 20th, 1619. You would know that every European explorer that came here, when they wrote in their journals about the people that they encountered here, we were the people that they wrote about. This is why they don't want us to know. This is why they don't want us to read. And it's really worked because we haven't read anything. A lot of us don't read, and we don't want to correct our status in this country. And the longer we do that, the longer we're going to hold ourselves back from our rightful place and getting everything that we're supposed to get. So I just wanted to make sure that we let all of that knowledge be born. I'm going to sit here and try to pull up these videos. We're going to take a look at a video about the history of Juneteenth. Let me see if I can get this queued up. 1 second. We're going to get this queued up. We're going to share this history of Juneteenth. Everything that we just pretty much went over in this presentation is what you're going to hear this brother talk about. But we want to make sure the message hits home. So we're going to share this so you guys can see. Okay. Let me get this window together. Okay, this video is going to be from at Mr. Crim3 on Instagram. Make sure you go follow the good brother for all the Black history. He's got all the Black history on his channel at Mr. Crim3. Here we go.
Lincoln didn't free the slaves, and General Gordon Granger was accompanied by as many as 10,000 Black Union troops when he read General Order 3 in Texas on June 19, 1865. So on this Juneteenth, Let's get the facts right, y'all. So check it out. When the Emancipation Proclamation was enacted on January 1st, 1863, it only applied to the Confederate States, which was also a different country. Also, it didn't free any black folks in border states who remained with the Union. States like Missouri, Delaware, and Maryland still enslaved us. And secondly, fam, Lincoln didn't fight in the war. So that freedom was contingent upon those black soldiers helping the Union win the war, which they did. If they didn't win, the Confederacy would have kept slavery, and Lincoln likely would have kept slavery within those border states. And Lincoln didn't propose the 13th Amendment, which would effectively ban enslavement forever. That was actually House Republican from Ohio, James Ashley. And let's not act like black people hadn't been freeing themselves since 1526, since Stono, since Nat Turner, since Harriet Tubman. What the Emancipation Proclamation provided was a trade-off that said, if you help us maintain the Union, then we'll provide support to protect widespread freedom for black folks. All right, now let's get to Union General Gordon Granger, who delivered news of the Emancipation Proclamation on June 19, 1865 in Galveston, Texas. He did a great thing, but he also came with about 10,000 black Union troops who went throughout Texas to enforce the proclamation and freedom, because our freedom could not be secured without military enforcement. So why don't we talk about brothers who accompanied General Gordon Granger, like Sergeant Major Minkins, for example? On this Juneteenth, let's shed light on black freedom fighters who first freed themselves and fought for our freedom, like the 28th Indiana, 29th Illinois, and combined New York 26th and 31st regiments of the U.S. colored troops. Let's get it right this year, y'all.
Okay, so you guys heard the brother right there. Let's get it straight this year. You heard him. Abraham didn't free us. We freed ourselves. Like I said, those 10,000 black Union soldiers, they were the reason that we were able to go militarily, physically enforce that special order number 3. So we want to keep that in mind when we're talking about all of this. Um, let's get into, when did the Civil War end? So I wanted to get into this and really make sure we understand when the Civil War ended. We're going to get into that date. I'm going to go ahead and share the screen, and we're going to read this. Okay, so this is from USA Today. The Civil War was the deadliest conflict ever fought on American soil, with approximately 620,000 fatalities, according to History.com. Recent analysis could even suggest these numbers are higher than estimated. It is estimated there were more American military deaths in the Civil War than there were in World War I, World War II combined. Those are according to the National World War II Museum stats. The fighting, which began in 1861, eventually ended with the original states that succeeded rejoining the Union. But did you know when the Civil War actually ended? And what was the final act really played out in a small town in Virginia? When did the Civil War end? Although Confederate General Robert E. Lee surrendered to General Ulysses Grant, the head of the Union Army, on April 9th, 1865, at Appomattox Courthouse in Virginia, the Civil War did not end until 16 months later. The official end came when President Andrew Johnson, who was vice president until the assassination of President Abraham Lincoln in April, declared a formal end to the war on August 20th, 1866. According to History.com and U.S. National Archives, while Lee's surrender was a success for the Union, the war was still not over because a great number of Confederate troops, including the second largest army in the Confederacy, the Army of Tennessee, under General Joseph E. Johnston, were active even after Lee's surrender. So they were still fighting. This was still going on. This is why what we just showed is, we know it's true, that us Black American Union soldiers, we had to physically go and force this. Because as you can see, that the fighting didn't even stop. So you thought that people who thought that they could enslave people were just going to stop because they felt they heard the president say so? No, they're still going to get their money off of their property. So anyway, On April 12th, while they were in North Carolina, the next day, Union General William T. Sherman and his men captured Raleigh, putting pressure on Johnston and pushing his men west. Feeling the pressure, Johnston reached out to Sherman to talk about peace agreements. However, they were initially rejected by Union leaders in Washington because they gave generous political concessions to the South. Confederate President Jefferson Davis ordered Johnston to continue fighting, but he refused, knowing he had his back to the wall. Johnston then reached an agreement similar to Lee's surrender at Appomattox with Sherman. So that's how it actually ended. And then let's also understand who William T. Sherman is, General William T. Sherman. He is the general who stated that he did Special Order 15 that states that the Black Americans should receive reparations. That's that 40 acres and a mule that we all are familiar with. Just some history for you guys to keep your minds open, keep your ears open, keep your eyes open. Pick up a book, start one book at a time. Start reading this history and kind of getting familiar with things because, again, these are the things that they don't want us to know. These are the things that they don't want us reading about. So we want to make sure that we do that, that we honor our ancestors by continuing to fight the good fight. Again, nothing is solved. If one of us are experiencing injustice, we all are. So it's really time for us to step up, come together, and not all people, because not all of us are going to come together and see eye to eye. But the ones who wanted enough, I feel like there are enough of us to come together, and maybe it's our duty to help lift our other brothers and sisters up that may not want it or just don't know they want it. Some of us are traumatized by our daily living activities. Some of us are just comfortable. Some of us are living in fear. So it's understandable, and we can't blame each other. We have to make sure that we're treating each other with respect. We're understanding of each other, that we love each other no matter where the others are, and that we're empowering each other and supporting each other. And that spells out rules. And that's what we do around here on BTV. Royalty rules. And that's how we should be ruling ourselves. And then once we're ruling ourselves with those 5 basic principles, we extend that to our husbands, to our wives. And then when we raise families together, we extend that to our children. And we create a nation of respectable individuals who understand the plight of their community on this planet. And that's how we'll change it. It didn't get this way overnight, so it's not going to change back overnight. It's really, again, it's really up to us to take it just the way we did when we fought in the war. I want to make sure that we understand that. And that's how I'll leave us. I'll leave us with love and peace, and happiness. Make sure you guys follow us, like the video, subscribe. This is our first Quest for Justice on Earth back since our hiatus. So this is episode 3. This is our Juneteenth episode, just really clearing up some history and giving us a different perspective. We did talk a little bit about the 70 CAP Cultural Ascension process. So we'll get more into that probably on one of our next episodes of Quest for Justice on Earth. Until then, make sure that you are walking in your light, you're walking in your truth, and that you're making decisions for you and your family that are going to benefit you, your family, and everybody in the nation. Because at the end of the day, we're all one. And what affects one of us negatively affects us all negatively. What affects one of us positively will affect us all positively. So it's really our time. It's our time to gatekeep our culture, to delineate, dedicate our time to each other, have meaningful discussions with each other, making sure that we're using discernment when we have these discussions with each other, documenting these discussions, documenting our delineations, documenting our creations, using discernment with our documentation. Once we get to that phase, then we can start developing things. We can start building things and putting our resources together to build a better community. And once we develop things, now we can deploy. Now we can form together in a formation and start deploying and doing these things in different cities, different states across the nation, building up these thought-provoking communities that care about the future of their generations. So I leave you with that. That's the 7D Cat. The quest for justice on Earth continues in the year 2024. Make sure you like, subscribe to Teller B TV. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook. Peace, love, and respect to the nation.